Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm going to be coloring glitter with Copics, and I'm going to use this Magnolia Blooms die set. Now this one's been around for a little while, but it's new to me, so I wanted to play around with it. I'm going to use this Velvet Cardstock for the outline of the magnolias, and I'm going to use cardstock with double-sided tape and transparent glitter for the base of my magnolias before I start to color them with Copics. So the first step is putting my adhesive or my tape sheets onto my cardstock. I like to do a large area or a large sheet of it and then cut it down to the size that I need. I'm using inexpensive index cardstock here. It doesn't need to be anything fancy or anything heavy because this is just the base. This extra little piece of adhesive here, I'll put right back on the backing, and I typically use that to put my cards together. I was going to do it for this card, but I totally forgot by the end of it, so I still have it for another card, but I do put it to good use. I'm taking this piece here and just cutting it into smaller manageable sizes that I can, or that will fit my Magnolia Blooms die on. And then I'm tucking that to the side. I'm going to take the die and I'm taking the inside part of it. This has two different dies to it. There's one with the details and then there is an outline die. I'm going to use the detail die for my piece of velvet cardstock. And this has adhesive on the back of it. So I don't need to put adhesive on the back when I am gluing it down on anything. And obviously because I'm using double-sided tape, I wouldn't need to put adhesive down for this either. But for if you're using it for other techniques or whatnot, it already has adhesive on the back of it. So I do want to take it out of the die quite carefully. This velvet cardstock is a little bit flexible and stretches just a touch, so I don't want to be too rough when I'm taking it out. And what I found best worked is taking a die pick and poking the ends of the leaves or the ends of the petals out, and then just working my way from the outside towards the center. Now for the technique that I'm doing here, I only need this outline. So any of the bits that are from the inside parts, I'm not going to be using it on this piece. I ended up tossing them. If you want, you could keep them and use them for another card, die cut another outline and then use them to paper piece or to piece inside of it. But I did not want to do that. So typically with cardstock, I would use my Spellbinders tool-in-one to poke those pieces out, but because this is fairly flexible, it did nothing. So I had to take my die pick and take each one of those pieces out individually. It is kind of annoying, but it's always nice to have a clean die when you go out or go to work with it next. So you do want to make sure to take those pieces out. With this Magnolia Blooms outline, I am making sure all of those pieces are out, and then I'm going to take my piece of cardstock that has the double-sided tape on it, take that backing off there, and I'm going to put my cardstock with adhesive to the side for a moment. I want to work on my backing piece. Now that piece of cloth or that microfiber cloth that I have in the top right corner there, it's a damp cloth. So you'll see me touching it, and it's just a way to dampen my fingers and loosen that adhesive so it doesn't stick to my fingers quite as much. I use that backing and have my die cut with the adhesive face up so that I can make sure that it's not distorted. I can get it down as quickly and easily as possible. And then you saw me take my cardstock with the exposed adhesive and just put it right down onto that backing. Because I'm putting it on backing, it's not going to stick to anything, and it makes it really easy to lift it up. And you'll see in a moment when I put the outline die on it how very little manipulation or movement that die cut had. On that exposed adhesive, I put some clear microfine glitter on there and then used a piece of that backing just to burnish it, make sure everything had really good contact with the adhesive. It flattens it out, it makes it sparkle, and then I used a Swiffer tool or a Swiffer cloth to get any excess off of that velvet cardstock. So here you can see that my outline die cut matches really, really well with the inside part. There's just one leaf on the top left side there, right by my left finger there, that kind of moved just slightly and doesn't line up quite as well with the rest of it. But really for such a large die cut and for velvet cardstock that's really quite flexible, that's not bad at all. I'm quite pleased with that. So there's a little hint. If you ever want to put something down and want to make sure that it doesn't get manipulated, put it down with the adhesive side up and then let it kind of go flat and then put your piece down on top of it. Now that our piece is die cut, I can use my Copics to color that glitter. And the ones that I'm using here is R22, R27, R29, and then I'm blending it out with a blender pen, a Copic blender pen 0. Now, I don't use my R29 very often, but I am taking that R22, blending that out. And then when I do my R27 here, I'm leaving those streaks in there. When you look at magnolias, they kind of have that naturally. So I wanted to leave those details in there. And then I'm taking that R29 and just going just in that center, just to deepen that color a little bit. My R29 ends up being fairly dry, so I grab an R37 just for those center parts. It's a little bit more pink than this particular color tone that I'm using. I'm wanting to I chose a more corally color. So the R37 is a little bit more of a pink tone than it really needs to be, but it's just for the centers of those flowers, so it doesn't alter anything too badly. I'm working one flower at a time, and I'm putting the lightest color in the centers of the flowers and then using that blender pen to blend it out. To my right, I have just a piece of scrap paper. I can clean off that blender pen. Because I'm working with all the same colors, I really don't necessarily need to, but it's just by habit. I regularly will go and clean off the tip of my blender pen just to get any excess ink off there, just to make sure it doesn't build up. Now I'm going in with that R27 just to make sure to get a little bit of depth and detail in the center of those flowers, and then back with the R29. And this is when I realized how dry this R29 is, and I don't happen to have a refill for it, so I go in with the 37. Put a little bit of that 37 in the two flowers that I've already done, just to make sure that when I go to do the third flower, it's not completely different in the center. And then any place that I find that I don't have enough blending out, I'll just take that Copic blender and blend it out a little bit better. I do like to use a few different shades for this, just to get some really nice shading for these flowers. And I am doing it so that the color comes from the center of the flower and then goes lighter towards the outside of the petals. If you wanted, you could have solid colored petals and then just go in with your shading colors to deepen the center of the flowers. I wanted them to be nearly white towards the outside of the flowers. So you can pick and choose. The sky's the limit when it comes to coloring with Copics on glitter. And because they're an alcohol-based marker, they will dry on this glitter. Now, I've been doing this technique for many, 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 many years. And I had someone many years ago tell me you could do this with Tombow markers as well. Technically, you can. However, Tombow markers are a dye-based marker. They won't dry on the glitter. The glitter is a non-porous surface. They won't dry. So for weeks afterwards, I tested it, and for weeks afterwards, I could lift off color. The other thing is Copic markers have a really good quality tip to them. So coloring with Copics on glitter, it really doesn't affect the tips. If by chance you have a tip that goes bad or gets not nice to color with, you can replace the tips on them. With Tombow markers, you can't. With Tombow markers, the glitter is very rough on the tips, so you tend to ruin that brush tip, as well as the fact that you can't replace a tip, you have to replace the entire pen. So those three things, the fact that the ink didn't dry, the fact that it ruins the tip, and you basically have to replace a pen with it, I find it works much better to do it with alcohol-based markers. Now, I've only ever done it with Copic markers because that is what I own. This should work with any alcohol-based marker that you have, because we're working with alcohol on the glitter, and it should work. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work with another brand if that's what you happen to have. So once I'm done with my flowers, I will do the second cluster of flowers off screen, and I'm going to cut them apart when I put them on the front of my card. Typically when I use dies like this, I'll put that in the center of my card, and I wanted to try something that's a little bit different for me. There's a tiny little base of the bud there. I wanted to color that green, so I did that before doing the other one off screen. And then I'm going to take a Hello die cut, and I'm going to die cut that one of the scraps of my Velvet Cardstock for the sentiment on the card. I took a die pick to take any pieces out of there. Now, like I said before, this velvet cardstock is very flexible and it's really hard to keep it completely straight. So in order to attempt to not have anything warp when I put that hello down, I left it in the die, took my backing off, and then just put it onto my gold cardstock that I wanted to have the outline of. Now this looks like I'm wasting gold cardstock because I've got it in the center, but this is actually going to be the mat on my card, and I'm die cutting out of the center that my image piece is going to sit on. So this is going to be behind my image piece. You're never going to know that it was die cut out of. This is a great way to get extra use or stretch your specialty cardstock. If you're not going to be able to see that something was die cut out of there, why not use it rather than cut an extra piece and create an extra die cut? So here I have a hello die cut with that velvet cardstock as the sentiment and the gold as the halo around it. I took my die cut Magnolia pieces and I just placed them around my image piece so that I could kind of lay out, see where I wanted everything to go. And then I used my thumb as kind of a guide to where the edge of the cardstock is so that I don't put too much glue where I don't have cardstock. I'm working on my Tim Holtz Media surface mat, so even if I do get glue on it, it's not a big deal. It's not going to ruin anything. I'm just going to have to wipe it up. But I do want to try to avoid that as much as possible, just to avoid as much mess as possible, really. As I cut pieces off, I'm going to take them and glue them to other areas of the card. We might as well use those pieces and fill up our background here. I can use a pair of scissors just to cut those extra bits off. And then any of the excess bits, you could, if you wanted, put them on the inside of your card. I tend to keep them, save them for other things, or get rid of them. It really depends on the situation. So this last little leaf here, I'm going to put that in this bottom right corner. And I really love how this background looks. Once again, this is different for me. I've seen similar looks like this online, but I've never actually done one. So I wanted to do something a little bit different, and it's also going to be a nice background to put that sentiment on. Here's that gold piece that I die cut the hello out of. I'm going to put it on kind of a dark corally base that coordinates nicely with the Copic colors that I use for those flowers, and then glue on my image piece. I like to put an acrylic block on those things in between time to hold them down while they dry, but I am going to put this sentiment on there first, and so that acrylic block can hold everything all in place. I'm using Barely Art glue and a fine tip bottle to glue everything down. With the fine tip bottle, I can get even the smallest sentiment glued, and I like the liquid glue because you have a few seconds to shimmy things in place, so this one starts to grab fairly quickly. I have a sub sentiment that I'm going to put below there, but I want to raise it up a little bit. So I just took some cardstock scrap strips and I'm just gluing them on there. And you can see I'm doing it on the two ends and leaving the center part open. I'm going to have this over top of the tail from one of the L's from that hello. So I want to leave some space there for that to go under there so that I don't happen to have a hump or a bump in my sentiment here. This sentiment here is one that I previously foiled from another project, and it's from the Mini Everyday Glimmer Sentiments set, and it works perfectly with this card with the hello, and the golds match lovely. I just took a Simon Says stamp ruler to help line everything up and make sure that that sentiment is all lined up properly. This is what I meant when I said that you could use those pieces that you cut off to put on the inside of the cards. You could, anything that has a nice flat edge there, you could glue that in there. There's not a whole lot of whole flowers left after doing that, but if you wanted to use them up and have them not go to waste, it's a good way to use them up. It ties it in with the front of the card. The last thing I did here was take some gold Nouveau drops and put them in the centers of those magnolias. To be honest, I'm not sure if I like it or not. Half of me thinks I should have left it with the black velvet. Half of me thinks it's fine. You be the judge. If you want to add them, you can absolutely add them. And if you don't want to keep it the black and want to keep it the black velvet, you can absolutely do that. I love the way Copics colored on glitter looks. That glitter has such a beautiful sparkle to it, and it just gives it such a great wow factor. And this technique itself is really not too hard. Once you learn it, it's quite a simple technique. This is perfect for holiday cards, but you can also use it year round. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Have a fantastic day.